Hi guys, thanks for stopping by. Today we are going to talk about some questions that we frequently get asked about foster care. So we're going to jump right in and start with licensing questions. First of all, we are in Michigan, so a lot of what we say may be specific to Michigan, and we foster through a private agency. So some of these rules and things we're going to discuss are specific to our agency. How it works, at least in Michigan, is everybody has to follow the state guidelines for foster care, and then private agencies are free to enforce even stricter regulations for the placements in their care. Well, first of all, if you are local to us or if you are in Michigan, you are welcome to contact me privately and I can tell you what agency we go through and what our experience has been with them. So first of all, to get licensed, it takes 4 to 6 months. That's what they told us when we started, and it did take the full 6 months in our case, 5, almost 6 months, I guess. So I mentioned that we go through a private agency. The other option is to go directly through like a Department of Health and Human Services office, whoever is in your county that handles foster care. So we have a Department of Human Services here in our county that we could have gone through, and then visits and things would have been held right there, which would only be a 10 or 15 minute drive for us. Instead, we opted to go with a private agency in another county. Now, the big disadvantage to that was it was almost an hour drive for us to go to the agency when we needed to take our placements there for a visit. But we felt it was worth it. From what we've learned from talking to other foster parents who fostered through directly through a county, we got a lot more support. And our social worker, our licensing worker, the supervisors, everyone was accessible. They would give us their cell phone number. We could text them anytime, nights, weekends, anything. Obviously, if it was an emergency or serious enough to warrant us to reach out to them at that time. And they would get back with us right away. So we never had a situation where I didn't know what to do and I couldn't reach anyone. We always got help right when we needed it. I've also heard from other people that at the county level, they're not as good about foster care payments, and that's something we'll talk about later, but the state does offer some support to help you cover the cost of care for the children. And that support, when we go through the private agency, they were very, very good about that. We would get a check in the mail and it would come the same day every month. It would be postmarked the same day every month. And so while our friends going through the government side would have to often wait for delays, we didn't have that concern. So if that's something that's on your radar, maybe a private agency would be worth it for you. Okay, so what goes into licensing? In Michigan, we have what is called PRIDE training, and I believe it's about 20 hours. I'm not sure if it's 24, something like that. So when we did our initial training, it was over 2 weeks. It was 2 Saturdays for most of the day, and then 2 weeknights for just 2 or 3 hours during the evening. So you need to complete the training, and ours just happened to be offered at our agency right at that time. There are other places you can go, and you do not have to go to the same place that you're getting licensed through. So if there's something, a church or something offering the training in a county near you, you can travel to that. Okay, some of the other things for licensing, they do complete background checks, as you can imagine. That includes fingerprinting, and the fingerprinting is one of the longest parts of the process. So they will probably have you do that right away, and then if it takes several months for the state to process it, you won't be just waiting on that. Now, as far as background checks go, you would have to talk to your licensing worker, but say you have like a speeding ticket, that's not going to trigger them to decline you as a foster parent. The things that could trigger it, from my understanding, are very serious crimes. I'm not sure how they approach felonies. I'm not sure if a felony is like an instant disqualification or not, so you'd need to ask that. Obviously, any sort of sexual crime is going to disqualify you. They specifically check into those registries and things to make sure that you haven't had any history of anything like that. Now, questions about your home and your family size. So as we understand it, in the Michigan guidelines currently, you are allowed to have 8 children under the age of 18 in a home. And so they can be biological, adopted, foster children. The total is not supposed to be more than 8. Now, I have been told by our social worker that they will make exceptions for that. And so, like right now, we have 6 kids. Say they got a call for 3 children that needed to go into foster care, and they were trying to find a placement to keep them together. If we were willing to keep them together and they couldn't find another home that was willing to do that, they may get an official exception from the state and allow us to take those 3 children, just as an example. Another situation that could cause that to happen would be if our adopted children had siblings come into care that needed a home, and that would push us over the limit. They would likely waive the limit so that we could keep them together. So if you're going into foster care for the first time, say you have 6 or 7 children already, if you're willing to take, say you had 7 kids, if you're willing to take a couple to keep them together, they may let you go over that limit of 8. If you're already above the limit, I'm not sure that they would even consider you, but they might. So please don't hesitate to call if it's on your heart. Amazing things happen when you put yourself out there. So also about your home. So as far as space requirements go, you're supposed to have 40 square feet per child. So we have a bedroom that has about 120 square feet. We're allowed to put 3 children in it. Now, where this gets weird is if you've been to our home, we have a room upstairs that has short walls, and so there'd be no room for bunk beds. But because the square footage is so big, they say that we could put 7 children in there, which I think is crazy. And we've told them that. So you have to be a little bit careful that you're not overextending yourself that way. And what I would suggest with the square footage, definitely be upfront and honest. I'm not saying to try to get away with anything. But if you measure it and it's like 3 inches shy one way of being the right square footage that you need, maybe just let the licensing worker measure it. They are not going to get down to centimeters. They're going to take a rough measurement, and if the room is big enough, or like in our case, our room has really high ceilings, we could put triple bunks in that room and there would be plenty of room for all the children. Just don't overanalyze, I would say, because when we first did this, I had a map on graph paper and I had it down to the inches, and that was a little bit excessive. So don't overstress about it. Let them come, let them look, let them measure, and let them tell you, what they think. Okay, also, we have had some of you ask us about your home. Does your home have to be new? Does it have to be fancy? What if your home isn't always that clean or tidy? Are they going to worry about that? Here's the thing. These kids are coming from awful places. And so if you have Cheetos on your carpet, I guarantee you they're not going to disqualify you for that. If there's health concerns, if you have... I don't even want to give examples, but if there are health concerns, that is going to be a problem. They need to make sure that these homes are safe and a healthy place for the children to be. They don't care how good of a housekeeper you are. They don't care if your carpet is 40 years old. They really don't, guys. That is not going to affect how good of a life you can give these children. So think of it in that mindset, and I think it will answer a lot of your own questions. The one thing specific to us that we had concerns about is we have an old farmhouse, and we don't have any record of what this septic system actually is. I know there is some kind of septic system, but it's been, worked on over the years. Various people have done things to it, and there's not like an official record at the county for what there is in the ground here for a septic system. And so we were really nervous that we had to have our water checked, and we knew the water would be good, but they also had to sign off on the septic being sufficient. And we were really nervous about that. But when the worker came out, he was able to find certain parts of it with a metal detector, and we got, I think, a B or a C rating on that part of it, which all that means is that we have to have that inspection done every year. And they're really just coming out to make sure that you don't have sewage welling up in your backyard. And so we have to have our water and our septic checked every year instead of, I don't know if it was every 3 or 4 years if you had an A rating. So please don't think, I know this or that isn't right in my house. If it's something serious, they may have to have you fix it. But You can always ask, and if it doesn't work out, then you can just stop the process at that point. But don't let that stop you from calling. Okay, also references. You do need to have several references, and I can't remember exactly. I want to say we needed 5 references up front, or maybe 3. And these just have to be people that know both of you. So if you're married or you have a partner that you're living with, and you're doing fostering together, they have to have you have to have references that know both of you. If that's not possible, you could probably double the amount of references and have them be individual to each of you. So references, which reminds me of something else. If you have someone in your home, living in your home that is over 18, you need to bring that up right away and see how they want you to handle that. Like, there were some people in our training classes that had a parent living with them, and that parent had to go through all of the same licensing steps because they were another adult living in the home with those children. So consider that and make sure you ask up front if that's your situation. Okay, and then you get into the real home study part of it. The home study is really 2 parts. There are parts specific to your home, which we talked about some of those, like the water. There are other things that you need to do in your home. For our agency and in Michigan, we had to lock up our medications. We had to lock up all of our cleaning supplies, even like our laundry detergent. We now have a cabinet next to our washing machine with a padlock on it where we put our laundry soap. And some of it was going to seem ridiculous, but you really just have to tell yourself, if you're going to do this, if you're a Christian and you feel this is what God's leading you to do, then don't let the small details bog you down, okay? You also have to lock up any firearms in your home, and this one was tricky for us as well because we had a safe that has a side for ammo and a side for guns, and you lock them both separately. We thought that would be more than sufficient for these guidelines, but as it turns out, the ammo and the guns have to be locked in separate locations, so they cannot be part of the same safe. They can't even be in the same room. The ammo has to be locked up in one room, and the guns have to be locked up in another room. So it's up to you how you're going to handle that, but I'm just letting you know what the rules are. And that's kind of how our worker phrased it to us, because we had every argument in the book. We're farmers, we need our gun accessible to, what if an animal is eating our animals, things like that. And from what we were told, that is a firm line and they cannot make exceptions. So ammo locked in one room, guns locked in another room separately. Or you could also, if you're like us and you have outbuildings, you could consider using your outbuildings in whatever way would make it easier for you too. And then as far as bedroom arrangements, you can have children of opposite genders sharing a room. So boys and girls sharing a room up until one of them is older than 5 years old. And so if you're trying to figure out room arrangements, that's what we've learned. 5 years old is when they cannot share a room with the opposite gender. I believe unless they're siblings. It might be allowed if they're a sibling. They also cannot share a room with anyone, even if they're the same gender. I don't think they can share a room with anyone over the age of 18 unless maybe they're siblings or something else. So consider those things, ask those questions. And then setting up the bedrooms ahead of time. So we did have to go out and buy 2 cribs, and then they were the kind that can turn into toddler beds as well. So we knew we would be all set no matter what kind of children, what ages we got. But our agency required those to be set up ahead of time before the license was final. Their reasoning for this is that in the past they have had people say, oh, my mother-in-law has a crib I could go get, or something like that, and then when it came right down to it and they called them with a placement, the crib never came, and that ended up being a big problem. So in our case, we at least had to send them a picture of the crib set up in the room it was going to be, or like we could have set it up in the basement and moved it upstairs. But in our case, the cribs didn't fit through the doorway, and so we did have an extra crib sitting around for several weeks before we got a placement in the nursery. Okay, now the second part of the home study is not actually to do with your home at all. It is to do with your personal information and your family. So there is a very detailed questionnaire that you have to fill out, and this includes like relationships you've been in, jobs that you have had, any crimes you've committed, any medications you take, any health concerns you have. And they also ask about your mental health and any history of counseling or therapy. I'm going to share with you guys something. A couple years before we got licensed, we were having a hard time with one of our kids, and I was having some issues with it, and I just really wanted to learn how to be a better parent. I was starting to get frustrated with him, and my husband and I were butting heads on what to do, and so we did go to talk therapy just to help us. We got the perspective of a Christian counselor to help us be better parents and learn some strategies to help us with him. And as I mentioned in my other video, I also had some nightmare problems, and so I had been to talk to the Christian counselor to try to get rid of my nightmares, which really helped, and I recommend it. But there's such a stigma about going to therapy that I was really nervous. Are they going to write us off as a mental case and not allow us to be licensed? So we actually asked about that at our very first meeting with the licensing worker, and I will tell you what he said. He looked us in the eyes and he said, "We would never fault you for wanting to better yourself." So if you have been to therapy, or if you have needed meds for anxiety or depression or something like that, please do not think that that's going to disqualify you from being a foster parent. Be upfront about it. They're going to want to see records from your therapist probably, or they're going to want to talk to them or get them to sign off. But please don't think that's going to stop you. And I thought that was awesome, because they very easily could have said, "Nope, sorry, can't do it." And that would certainly discourage people from getting help that they need. So anyways, you have to share all of that stuff, which is very awkward, and they're going to ask you questions about it. I had to write down that my parents were divorced, and they're going to ask you how you feel about it, and they're going to ask you how your relationships are with, each of your parents and things like that. And then they're going to not judge you on it, but they're going to write it all up in a report, and they're going to send it to you at some point. And it's going to be very strange to read through basically someone else's summary of your life and all the hard parts about it. But again, I want to encourage you that they are not going to be scared off easily. So be upfront, share. It's okay if you don't have relationships that are good or whatever. They just want to know upfront. Okay, also for your kids, they're going to need to know health history on your kids. And they will give you a form that you take to your doctor for a physical. You don't actually have to have a physical done just for the form, but the doctor has to sign off saying that she is confident that you have no physical or mental problems that would affect your ability to care for a child, is basically what they want to see. They want that one little box checked, and then the rest is just extra. And they want to know that the kids that you already have in your home don't have severe enough problems to also be a danger or a hindrance to the other children. So if you already have placements in your home, they're going to want to know that you can have more and it's not going to be a problem. Okay, finances. Let's talk about money. Can you foster if you are not well off? Absolutely. I wouldn't say that we're particularly well off. Can you foster if you are having a hard time paying your bills? So here's what it is. The state is supposed to give you enough money to more than cover the expenses of the child, but they want to be sure that if that payment doesn't come on time, that kid is still eating dinner. That's what they want to know. So if you're in the midst of filing bankruptcy or something, I'm not sure what they would say. They basically want to see you have enough income coming into the home to support a child if needed. Especially when you first take a new placement, it might take a while to get the payments coming in. So you'd have to talk to your agency about what specifically they want, but they just want to know that you are, able to eat and put gas in your car and things like that. So you do not have to be rich and have a big savings account or anything like that. And then as far as payments for the children, I'm not going to get into specific amounts, but I do want to tell you, when we started foster care, one of the things that we considered was the financial obligation of it. We had heard, different things about payment from foster care, but we heard that it really wasn't much at all, and it wasn't going to be a drop in the bucket towards the expenses for these kids. So we waited to do foster care until we were confident that we could support the cost of 2 more kids. feeding them, clothing them, transporting them. We knew there wouldn't be medical bills because the state does cover that, but still, we wanted to make sure they had everything they needed, and so we waited until we were in a place where we thought we could cover that if we had to. So when we got them and we started to get a payment for them, it was very weird to us because we felt like we were trying to do this thing to help them, and now we're getting paid for it. And I don't know I don't know the lifestyle of people who are saying it's not enough to care for the kids, but we feel like it's more than enough to care for them, much more than I would spend on our own kids in a day. I would tell you not to worry about the financial part of it. Just make sure that you have enough to cover it, and that it meets their standards, and then you will get those payments eventually, and that will help you. If you need to do things like buy a bunch of new car seats all at once, or if you're gonna have to buy a bigger vehicle, something like that, you're obviously gonna have to save for that and be able to cover that on your own. But the monthly payments are gonna go a long way in helping you to afford this. So if money is your concern, put yourself out there, just talk to the agency, see what they say. I don't think it'll be a problem for you. Okay, so you meet all the rules, you get your license, and then what happens after that? At least with our agency, you go for 6 months, and then you meet with a licensing worker again, and they do kind of a renewal. It's not an official renewal on your license, but they just submit an updated report, and from then on, it goes for a year at a time. And then you have that visit and that new report done. You also have to do some ongoing training. I'm not sure if it's 10 hours a year. I'm not sure, but you have to do a few hours of training, and there are online resources, and there are also like in-person seminars and things you can attend. So there are options for that.